has the whole monopoly. I don't know who that son of a bitch thinks he is.
Welcome to Laid Back Law with your favorite lawyers from around the interwebs.
No. Piers Morgan is doing the hide my boner lean. That's what he's doing. Look at him.
I think this is actually the first time that a billionaire cut safety standards, and it was the billionaire themselves that died.
And that's what made Poliere's, I don't even know how to pronounce this guy's name.
Poliere.
I'm board certified criminal trial law in Florida. I'm your man. Of course, you have to compensate me.
Discussing the most pressing of topics every Friday at noon Eastern Time.
I did this way before him. I had the big brain panel before Eric Hunley even existed.
And shocker, Joe is here at noon. What happened? He's up. He's alert.
I was video editing, actually.
Looks like you were just delivering a baby, Joe.
Yeah.
Sorry. Obligatory.
No, he's a moil.
Nice. Nice.
I have jokes that I'm not going to. Given
No,
the general,
please do.
No. You know where the. Never mind, Joe. I'll tell you offline. With the overall environment today, I will not make any jokes that could be misconstrued.
Right. You don't want to get struck with violating any new law. So.
God, speaking of, have you seen the somebody shared TikToks of this guy who's going on campus and walking around? He's a black guy with bleached blonde curly hair.
Soldier. There's a little half of his name is Soldier. What's the
I got in contact with him. I think I'm going to have him on for an interview, but the dude, I love what he is doing. Going up to the student saying, what, why are you wearing a mask? Why can't you talk to me? What? And they're like, and they don't know what to do with him because he's like, I'm black. What are you going to do?
Well, hold on one second. Not that I'm jealous, but how did you get in touch with him? I DM'd him via his web page, his internet website page.
I sent an email via his webpage, I believe, but I don't know. Obviously, I'll hook you up.
No, dude. What's his first name? It's
Michael.
No, his handle was something SOULJA. What was the first word?
I don't know. He's Daddy Milagro.
Yeah, it's fantastic what he's doing.
So I mean, yeah, definitely. I'm sure you'll want the exposure. You have a bit of a bigger channel than I do.
Well, that doesn't mean anything, especially with the way things are going on YouTube these days. The little bastards, they're really giving me a hard time, I think.
Yeah. By the way, don't say any other platform name. People may know of other platforms. They may even be watching this on other platforms, but we do not mention any other platform names.
Oh, is that a new thing?
In the chat.
I've heard that, and then there was a rumor that you couldn't super chat with a certain word that rhymes with Bumble,
which is true.
Well, I was able to, so I tested it on Govea. I tested it on myself. But the thing is this. At some point, I will not drop the F-bomb because we're still in the first 5 minutes. At some point, I will have to suffer the consequences and just say F you. I'm not going to. I'll say my Sharona Cyrus because it's funny. But at some point, what I'm going to go join me on Ruble, but add an M in it. Like it's at some point.
You could do like
Viva
Jeremy.
Refuses to crumble.
Nah.
No.
Go to the green platform. We'll just call it that green platform. I took that from Jeremy from the Quartering.
That's interesting. So what are there teeth to that? Because we got a demonetization notification yesterday, and I thought it was because of the conversation around House Bill 6090.
Probably that too. Just fight it and pray.
Which one's the House Bill 6090? Is that out of New York?
It's the one for the hate speech. It's the hate speech one.
That's going to be
Anti-Semitism Awareness Act?
Correct.
Oh, hold on. I'm an idiot because I might have looked at the wrong proposed bill yesterday. Michael Lawler, who's the New York guy that did it, it's a state law or it's a federal law?
Federal. It's Congress, yeah. Okay,
so I might have been looking at the wrong proposed bill because I looked at one that was from 2023, which basically said they want to incorporate the what's the word I'm looking for? The Holocaust, the HRMI or whatever it is. They want to incorporate
International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance or something like that. I'll bring it up.
Oh, so I was looking at the wrong thing.
What I've seen so far, I find the whole bill disturbing and completely wrong because of free speech. I mean, I want them to shut down these riots. Anyway, they're destroying property, things like that. Absolutely round them up if they're destroying property, they're trespassing, or they're causing problems. All of that. However, you can't. I mean, hate speech is free speech, no matter what I think of it. And Joe, you probably feel firsthand. I don't know, but that's my general overall take, and it's probably going to be an uncomfortable conversation later for me.
Well, I mean, it should not be an uncomfortable conversation. If you care about Jews, you should not want this law to pass.
That's
It's that simple.
I think it's harmful.
I am Jewish. Most people know that, and I'm a practicing Jew. And I think that this is actually not just a violation of everything we understand to be constitutional, just terrible concept. This is classic leftist thinking of if we silence people, that will somehow change minds or will not have a kickback, which is far, far worse. This is your classic terrible Marxist idea of like, this sounds like a really good idea, which will almost definitely, invariably harm the very people you're purporting to try protecting. It is a terrible, 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 terrible idea. I mean, there are enough laws on the books restricting our speech that it's a stupid yardstick. It's a ridiculous thing. It's the application. It's stupid in concept. It's stupid in application. It's stupid in everything, in every way possible. It's terrible.
Can we start with, you want to like unpack this? It's very short. It's not like it's going to take us.
Sure. Go. Michael, please.
We talked about this, and I want to say this. Norm and I had a pretty spirited discussion on this yesterday on our stream because Norm has been talking about
Norm Pattis.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's Alex Jones. For those who don't know, we can't presume. Alex Jones' attorney, some January 6th attorney. I'm going to name him to
Proud Boys.
Yeah. General badass, and maybe I just got us demonetized. I'm sorry about that. So we were talking about this yesterday, and for the last several years, Norm and I have been maybe keeping abreast of what we believe is going to be the development of legal precedent around a hate speech exception to the First Amendment, which will probably manifest underneath sort of that obscenity, maybe an expansion to the obscenity doctrine within those exceptions to the First Amendment. And primarily, we've seen that through the growth of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the push for reparations. And we've been looking at it through that prism of sort of the way that small local governments are being sort of inundated with these demands that they do studies on these various things. What has happened, however, and I'm kind of giving you some free game here, Viva, for your 2 p.m. with him, but he is right now, I think, philosophically trying to peel everything back and determine whether there is, I think, room to acknowledge a hate speech exception. So from that perspective, he was actually arguing in favor, theoretically, of House Bill 6090. And again, he's not established on this, and it is completely contradictory to how he has been in the past, but he's trying to leave room for that based on current events and where we are. My issue, I think, and we can go through the bill, is that I have, I think, more structural issues with how this has even come about, the how swift it was, the environment that we're analyzing right now, especially with college campus protests, the due process considerations that have been pulled back within Title IX, and then the TikTok ban, right? And it's not just a TikTok ban, but in general, what all of this ultimately means. I was arguing from a perspective of substantively, I agree with you, Eric, I agree with you, Joe, and Viva, that there is no, in my mind, legal argument. I don't even think that the bill as written passes a rational basis test, let alone strict scrutiny or being narrowly tailored. But beyond that, I think that I saw the speed and then the brevity of it, and then the overall amorphous nature of the definition that they kind of reference as sort of a raw expression of political power by very particular interest groups within Congress to be able to bring something that quickly through Congress and through the House in a time that is as obvious right now as we're debating the issue of speech, something as fundamental as the First Amendment under our Constitution.
The concept. Hello, Eric. Thanks for the invite.
Of course.
Hey, I didn't know Joe was Jewish, by the way. I don't know if I should still.
Me neither.
Sorry, I let the cat out of the bag on that one.
But yeah, you got to keep those things to yourself. Well, I think that Mr. Boyer here has a good point, and that is that there's a doctrine called void for vagueness and over breadth. And the fact is that this idea of hate speech is broad and vague. And so even if it doesn't fail on First Amendment grounds as just being anti-First Amendment, it could also be that just the mere fact of define hate speech. What is that? Tell me exactly precisely what that is and what you're banning. Because I think there's a problem. Well, we all know it when we see it. It's the whole pornography discussion that's been that has been around and batted around, they've had trouble with defining. I think the same thing applies to hate speech. So the definitions are a big issue.
Oh, good. Steve, I was going to say, go check out Supreme Court of Canada defined hate speech, and they want to work it into the most recent amendments to the criminal code. They say it's scorn or contempt that goes beyond mere, not ridicule, but there's a ridiculous definition I'll get to in a second. But Eric, go to the second bullet in examples of anti-Semitism, because I'll tell you this: nothing will disprove this classical definition of a classical example of anti-Semitism, making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews as such, or the power of Jews as collective as such, especially but not exclusively the myth that the Jews control whatever. Nothing will disprove that myth than having Congress with statistical overrepresentation of Jews passing a bill that prevents you from saying things against Jews. Holy cow!
You mean the only group that they passed a bill against saying something to? Only group in the whole world, and not blacks, not trans, nobody else.
Bear in mind, that was even passed off in the Holocaust Memorial, whatever that website is. That was passed off as non-legally binding in their website. But that bill, if I'm not misunderstood it, wants to incorporate those examples of anti-Semitism in what would be outlawed under this bill. I mean, it's like what the ADL is doing. If their goal is to make people anti-Semitic, this is the first step, because congratulations, you'll convert people, but not the way you think.
Yep.
And that's my fear, and I'm sure. Well, even more importantly, Joe's fear, because I can stand on the side, and most people wouldn't, really mix me up with anybody in that mix.
Well, pushing back a little bit on Viva, I will say that it's not like there's been a decrease in anti-Semitism upon our campuses and our culture. So, I'm not sure if this is going to trip it off. I understand it does feed the conspiracy theories, but I don't know if that should be the driving force behind legislation, whether it's good and effective or not. I
made a point yesterday because I was looking this over, and I said, look, everyone says anti-Semitism is on the rise. And it's tough to deny that when you see what's going on campuses. They also say anti-Asian violence is on the rise. They also say trans violence is on the rise. Hey, here's an idea. Violence is on the rise, and it affects people. When you tolerate lawlessness, it affects everybody. So the idea, you make this bill to protect Jewish communities, provide security for Jewish communities. And I got an idea. Just provide security for communities, and you'll see a decrease in all forms of violence, racially, ethnic motivated, or just regular violence.
Question for you: is anti-Semitism on the rise, or is it just being more revealed or being more open? Because I feel like these things are already there under the surface. Most people know, just all of a sudden go, you know what? I really don't like these people. They were fine with me yesterday, but now suddenly I don't. So I'm just curious if this isn't just forcing it to bubble out.
People that say punch the Nazis now are giving Nazi salutes to Jewish students, right? It's the same crowd.
Mm-hmm. That's the Karl Popper. That's Karl Popper. Everybody goes through the Karl Popper bit about the whole free speech is fine, except unless we're doing blah, 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 blah. And then we have to, and it leads into punch a Nazi. Everything is punch a Nazi.
One quick clarification, just to narrow this focus, because there's a distinction from what we're talking about banning hate speech, so to speak. And then there's another controversial, but a little more legally viable concept of hate crime enhancement. And so those are two different issues. So one has to do with if your motivations are one of these listed categories, but there's an underlying crime. What we've done is now what we're talking about here, I think, is taking away the crime and just making the motivation itself criminal. So, we've kind of gone from the hate speech legislation, which is controversial, especially on the right, but there's debates on that. But ultimately, if somebody hits you with a bat, you're dead either way. But if you're doing it because there's a hatred behind it, then, but those things are enhancements in like a death penalty situation or other situations. Here we're extracting the crime. So I just want to focus on what we're talking about.
Well, and so to that end, because I brought up the due process, the Title IX rollbacks that the administration, and this is barely 2 weeks old, if that. But it's not irrelevant, because this bill, House Bill 6090, is focused on amending the 1964 Civil Rights Act to incorporate the definition of anti-Semitism for purposes of application on college campuses, right? So I think that we can even narrow it further to ask the broader question of what is being done to the institutions, right? At a top-down level, what is going on? Is the motivation to isolate these sorts of weird issues into smaller battlegrounds all over the country so that we kind of confine the confusion to people that are, are not, taking out big loans and whatever, or I just don't understand that. That's why I peel back and look at the broader picture. I was blown away, almost impressed with the sort of the pure expression of political power embodied in being able to do something like this so openly and without, again, so that with the broad, vague terminology, incorporating a reference to an institution that the United States is a member of, that's an international organization, in almost overnight, right? It just happened. Over 300 members of Congress voted for it in the House, and then it goes to the Senate. Of course, I don't know what to make of it beyond that, but I thought that beyond just the substantive merits, I'm still blown away by what that move means at this particular point in time. It's impressive that there is a lobby strong enough to galvanize 300 members of Congress almost overnight to do something that is as critical to our functioning republic as affecting the First Amendment.
Boy, what you just suggested right there will be illegal under this new bill. Bada bing, bada boom. But also,
you're coming from Canada, which already is very concerned about speech. Jordan Peterson warned us about. No, I mean, I'm just saying. So it's like you guys are leading the way.
If you want to see where it goes, look to Canada, where you have, they try to define hatred in a law that would have you locked up for potentially for life for advocating or promoting genocide, whatever those three terms mean. But Steve, to your question. Is anti-Semitism on the rise? Like when you get old enough, you live through these cycles. There was the first Intifada where you had these types of protests. The second Intifada where you had these types of protests. They've been banning, Jewish speakers or protesting Jewish speakers at Concordia University in Montreal since I was in university in '98. I remember when they protested and boycotted. I think it was Netanyahu, Bibi, back in. I want to say it would have been in the 2000s. So whether or not it's on the rise, I don't actually think it is. But what is on the rise is it becomes a meme. It becomes a troll. It becomes part of the, just the online joke. And so you go on Twitter at some points in time. You had the N-word being dropped a lot after they were accusing Twitter of being racist. And so people get in on this. It takes on a life of its own, so to speak. And it's not really racially motivated. It's just trolly motivated. And we're seeing it now here.
Following up on that, see, I think it's a little broader than just anti-Semitism, and I think it's the sort of we have the anti-Semitism is generally the canary in the coal mine in cultural problems, but it's a broad-based attack by the left on institutions of the United States. It's a revolutionary concept, and it doesn't matter the vehicle. If the vehicle is anti-American, anti-Constitution, anti-freedom, I'm on board, whether it be tearing down the Statue of Washington or being against the Jews, or if I'm doing this, whatever the thing that tears down institutions and tears down the country more, the revolutionaries want to do it. And so it's there's no unifying concept except that hatred of what is. There is, and this is it's really a communist ideology, and that comes from who's the crazy thinker up in MIT that's the
Ted Kaczynski?
No. The guy, the professor.
He was Harvard, by the way.
The professor up there who's of linguistics, who's
Noam Chomsky.
He talks about this, about it doesn't matter. The question is always the revolutionary. It's not the question, it's the revolution. The issue is just a way to attack. And because these groups, they form, it's like now this is the hot thing, and they're all protesting and burning here. Then they run over here and they burn and protest.
Yeah, it was Black Lives Matter. It was COVID.
What happened to Black Lives Matter? What happened to COVID? What happened to Wall Street? The burn Wall Street,
Occupy Wall Street.
It's just like here we jump from vehicle to vehicle on it's seemingly unrelated issues. And they flame up, and then when they run out of steam, they jump to the next thing. And of course, the Jews have always been an easy target because they're a minority. They stand aside, they're separate, and they're successful. And so that's traditionally a target of the left. Look at communists. The communists were very anti.
Very.
And this is just kind of par for the course. And because what but United States stands for freedom and protection of individuals and our ability to worship freely. Anti-Christianity, anti-Catholic Church, anti. Well, what are you for? You're for destruction.
Yeah, Steve. And this is really interesting, again, about the bill. At least something I found intriguing is that the history of the Judeo-Christian development and the prosperity of the West has been something really enshrined and dominated by the political right. And of course, I think the political left has gone further afield. I'm 34 years old, so I remember a time when I thought I was a Democrat as well. And there for good reason, but things were not as they are now then. But what is interesting to me about this bill in particular is that it sets the stage for an internal fracture of the political right that I just described, right? Because those on the political right that would otherwise advocate for those principles of free expression, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, are now being lambasted by those who are trying to uphold a new ambiguous standard of how they're allowed to think and speak and engage in conversation. And that is just a further fracture of what it has historically been, I think, a really productive alignment of groups, right?
Well, let's be honest. We've got double standards all over the place. We're all full of it. Like there's so many people, especially leftists, that are very concerned about the students' free speech, and they suddenly discovered it over the past couple of weeks. Like, hey, what about their free speech? And then before.
I'll say this. So if the paradigm is on the political left, we're watching a rise in the sort of Hamas favorable sentiment, right? And there is an obvious contradiction on the other side of that. Well, what do we make of perhaps the Israel lobby and the Jewish interest in the United States, who are now having to police speech from historical allies, right, on the political right at the same time? So on the political left, you have sort of the rising or the ascendant left that is now fundamentally opposite to what it historically has been. But then there's a fracture in terms of that alignment I described on the political right. I think that's what I'm most wary of, is that it's like, hey, we're all buddies, I think.
Well, here, first of all, the Daniel Patrick Moynihan would not exist in the modern day leftist party. And so, but Reagan and them did a lot of good things together in the country. And there was the Moynihan report, for example, going way back. I'm 57. So the other thing is the left is the politics of the mob. And what you're pointing to is that the conservatives and the right and the people that want to preserve have not formulated a coherent response to the leftist mob takeover of institutions. And we still don't have that answer. And therefore, that's why you see the mob taking over, because they can use the media, the mob mentality, the shout down, the protest, all these things. And there's no coherent conservative answer to that. That's why they keep winning. And I think it's incumbent upon the conservatives to formulate such a strategy that would apply generally. Otherwise, we're going to keep losing.
Well, 2 points. I want to hi, everybody, by the way.
Hi, Jeff.
Michael, nice to meet you. The 2 points that I had, one, I think Steve is absolutely correct. The problem with the right is they tend to be above it to the point where it's like, okay, they're throwing these slings and arrows, but let's just stand above it. It's beneath us to even respond to this. So we don't respond, and then you let it build up and build up and build up into a wall. But as someone who's been an expat from the U.S. for 35, almost 36 years, I found the absolute best cure for radical liberalism is to get out of the country and live in another country, and you can see just how damn good you have it back home in the U.S.
Where are you?
South Korea.
South Korea. And by the way, I have to make the joke now. Legal Vices, you channel Gavin McInnes every time I see you, and Norm Pattis is a mix between Robert De Niro and Jeff Daniels. It's
no,
absolutely. I see Robert De Niro right now.
David, watch the movie True Believer with James Woods, and that's Norm Pattis on the nose. God. Go and look it up. True Believer.
I have to deal with this guy every day. Can we not stroke his ego anymore? Just
No, take a look, David. Look it up.
Hold on, James Woods or
James Woods, Robert Downey Jr., True Believer. Look it up.
And who does he look like from that movie?
The lead, James Woods.
James Woods, really?
Nah, I'm seeing more Jeff Daniels, De Niro. I'm seeing more De Niro, Jeff Daniels, love child. Yeah.
You talking to me? You talking to me?
You talking to me? You talking to me? Hey guys, I'm gonna go out and hunt some of those deer. Deer hunters, because they got 4 legs, but you can only take one shot at a time.
Oh God. Okay, so you know what? I'm going to jump because I think we've unpacked that. Somebody put in the super chat. We've got a guy who's doing it. Trump is filing a motion to ungag. Have you seen it, Joe?
I have. I mean, I haven't seen his motion yet. Now he's fighting it on constitutional basis. What a novel thought. What a novel idea. Someone should have thought of that a long time ago, like 3 weeks ago, and started filing papers.
Look for cut and paste in his motion.
I am curious to see if they're going to embrace the arguments that I present, because I mean, they know about it. I forwarded the notice of this whole thing. They sure as hell can get their hands on it if they were so inclined. His attorneys have never even bothered reaching out to me, which is par for the course, basically, with the rest of anyone outside of this law tube genre has basically said, "Oh, we don't care much about that story," and I'm kind of mystified by it. I've been telling everyone I'm supposed to be arguing on Monday. That's what they told me when I was there on April 16th. I do want to give everyone a heads up that I called the court today and I was like, "Am I supposed to be coming in person or is it via Zoom?" And they say, "We don't see you as arguing on Monday. It's on submission." So, which is very, very annoying because I was really looking forward to pounding the table there. But
now, who are you again, and why should I care, Joe?
Yeah, I'm really a nobody, but yeah.
But is that a thing? I mean, do you feel just sort of like, hey, I'm the perfect person situated to be this arrowhead, this focal point, but I'm being treated as an outsider?
I definitely felt frustrated with the lack of coverage from people who talk so much in their complaints and refuse to even look at my arguments and respond to that. That's been very frustrating. And the people I've been calling out have been Jonathan Turley, Alan Dershowitz, Mark Randazza at least gave me the courtesy of saying, "Look, I looked at your arguments, your papers are well drafted. I just disagree with your conclusions." And I said, "Great, let's have a 15-minute conversation so I can walk you through how I reach these conclusions."
Which conclusion did he disagree?
He never said anything beyond that. I mean, it's very easy to say you're going to lose in this atmosphere where everyone knows I'm probably going to lose, at least at this level.
My retort would be, I think people they're despaired and nobody's going to, it's a foregone conclusion. You're never going to succeed, Joe. It could be Turley, it could be Dershowitz, it could be Mother Teresa presenting that motion. It's never getting granted until it gets to a higher court that has to abide by the law and not abide by the corruption of that judge.
How about this? I
wouldn't say corruption.
I'll say it.
I would never say, I'm in New York, and I certainly would never say corruption.
How about this, Joe? I think it answers it right in front of you because I donated to your Gifts and Go earlier, and I actually put my name on it. But there's a lot of anonymous on your Gifts and Go.
There are a lot of
anonymous.
So
the truth of this is maybe it's people not ignoring you. Maybe it's people saying, "I do not want to get involved with that." And by the way, I did put a link to Joe's Gifts and Go in the description.
Thank you.
And everybody, please.
It's very easy to remember. It's givesandgo.com/ungag Trump. I mean, how much easier?
Did you say we are all John Eastman? I couldn't hear you. Is that what you said?
I will tell you this. Yesterday I called up Kurt on civil law, who, no disrespect to anyone on this panel, I've always looked at him as being someone who has just an insane encyclopedic memory of Supreme Court cases. That happens to be his gift. I hear myself echoing, but that happens to be his gift. And I said, "Look, I really appreciate if you look at my arguments and tell me if what my read is as to how the Supreme Court treats gag orders is legally correct analysis." And he said, "I'm a little hesitant to do this because I'm afraid that if I come out on the wrong side, you're going to be upset at me." I said, No. I want you to hash it out with me. In fact, let me share with you what my perspective is, and you tell me whether this makes sense. And he started dead set against me. He's like, "I think you're wrong," and he presented his argument as to why he thought I was wrong. I mean, if I can spend if you give me 5 minutes to walk you through how the conversation flowed. My basic premise, as far as Judge Merchan's misanalysis of law, is that they talk about in Nebraska Association case, and this is what's cited by Judge Merchan. They cite Nebraska Association, he cites Landmark Communications and Shepard v. Maxwell. And they talk about a balancing test as to where it is that we should ever employ some sort of order that will restrict First Amendment rights. And when they engage in this balancing testing, he cites those are 3 Supreme Court cases. He says, "You see, sometimes we can if we employ this balancing test, and it shows that we need to restrict free speech." What he ignores, and that I think is a fatal flaw in his analysis, excuse me, is that every time the Supreme Court has engaged in that analysis, there has been competing constitutional interests on each side, one in favor being First Amendment of protecting speech, and the other against and toward infringing speech, which has invariably been Sixth Amendment rights, that someone's Sixth Amendment rights are going to be trampled. And the point that I make in my papers is that based on what we see from the Supreme Court, you can never infringe on First Amendment rights. They say over and over again that there's a heavy presumption that a gag order is constitutionally invalid. And the only way you can get past is you have this balancing test. But that balancing test, every time the Supreme Court has said this is an okay place to engage in that balancing test, is because there's an interest in protecting someone's Sixth Amendment rights or 14th Amendment rights to due process. And that's where we can start having this balancing test, because we're terrified that, look, if we don't do something about the unchecked First Amendment rights, someone's right to a fair trial is going to be destroyed. And since you're going so far that you're destroying it, that we're going to say, you know what, maybe we have to dial it back a little bit on the First Amendment. But there's a constitutional interest that's being protected here. Whereas in this instance, there is no constitutional interest that's being protected. They were protecting what they call the fair administration of justice. That's the label that they put on this side. And both constitutional interests are against instituting a gag. There's the First Amendment right, and Trump's Sixth Amendment rights are both saying, don't gag me, don't gag me. So
well, let me play devil's advocate here and say, what about there may not be a countervailing amendment, but there may be profound structural reasons insofar as it's the independence of the judiciary and the judiciary's responsibility to ensure that all sides get a fair trial.
Excellent. Because this is what Kurt on civil law was throwing at me initially. Exactly what Norm just said now. He's like, Joe, you're saying that there's no such thing as instituting a gag. That's just not true. We see situations where a gag can be issued when we have cases with the mob, with the mafia. So they're gagged from being able to talk about witnesses in different locations and things of that nature. We see circumstances where, in the interest of justice, and there's no constitutional interest that's being protected, there is a gag order instituted. And that's why I disagree with you. And this is what I threw back at him. So what you need to realize is not just that the nature of the speech that Trump, I said first and foremost, the nature of the speech that has supposedly been problematic has been speech that no one could properly read facially as ordering anyone to do anything nefarious. Every time, the first speech they identify as being problematic is when he first says the New York Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg is been out to get me, and he's about to indict me. The left is going to kill our country. Protest. And he writes that all in all caps. And they say, and after this, the next day we got a death threat. It's okay. The news broke, and you got a death threat. That's got nothing to do with necessarily a causal link. That's because he tweeted that out. If he didn't tweet it out and it was in the New York Times, the same thing might have happened. We don't know that. But he said to me, well, we see all the time that we're afraid that the mafia, this is what Kurt's saying to me, along the lines of what Norm was saying to me, that the mafia is gagged when they're not going to be overt. They're notoriously covert in the way that they try to get their, try to issue a hit on somebody. And I said, here's the key distinction between those mob cases and this situation here. The key distinction is that in those mob cases, the speaker has a target audience of one person or 5 people or a dozen people. They figures one of them will get the message out there that all I have to do is rub my nose when I mention a name or make a motion with my hand across my throat or something like that, or anything that might be otherwise innocuous, and there's a conspiracy that he's engaging in with that free speech, a conspiracy at attempted murder, that he's basically trying to get someone killed by using his speech. That's why we're gagging him, because we think here's a scenario where someone who has the ability to engage in conspiracy to commit murder will use his free speech to engage in that crime, that he's actually going to be committing a crime that we won't realize it. That's why he's being gagged. No one has made any such assertion about Trump that he even knows who the actors are, has any prior relationship with him, like some mob don would have. And accordingly, to compare him to a mob don who specifically is trying to target that certain people should hear his message and act on it is 1,000% different from this scenario where Trump is making a statement, and there's an assumption that some crazies from the ultra scary, ultra terrible MAGA are going to go out there and act nefariously. That is
there's a simpler and less energized hypothetical, and
that's less fun.
There's nothing less energized than Joe.
No, but there's a simpler, and this is the one that I I've been gagged with, candidly, and that is that the comments will find their way to a juror and have a prejudicial effect. So typically, as you saw in Gentile versus the Nevada Bar Association, the guy at the time of his client's indictment made comments about the credibility of a witness, and by referring to things that a jury might never hear. So the difference between a trial and a press conference is at trial, the utterances have to be relevant and admissible, and they can be deemed inadmissible, and the finder of fact never hears it. On the courthouse steps, you can say anything you want. And so doesn't the court have a legitimate concern that a person making extrajudicial comments on the eve of or during trial about witnesses can undermine a party's right to a fair trial, in this case, the people of New York's? Well, how would you respond to that?
I love the idea to crystallize my perspective all the more by having people attack and say, what about this? What about that? With respect to the Gentile case, Justice Sandra O'Connor specifically came out and said in her concurrence that the reason why Gentile she opens her concurrence up by saying that the reason why Gentile seems like it could be appropriate is because they're restricting the speech of attorneys who have willfully submitted themselves to the domain of the court. So it's specifically the fact that you all of us, by becoming attorneys, one person here, present company accepted, but the rest of us here who all signed up to become attorneys, we voluntarily submitted our speech to the domain of the court, and it's even listed in the disciplinary rules 7-107 that there are areas where our speech can be restricted. That is completely different from a criminal defendant who's dragged kicking and screaming into the courthouse. And then to say, if you want to tell me inside the courthouse there's rules once you're inside the building here, okay, that kind of makes sense. You don't want someone screaming death threats, defendant screaming death threats. But outside the courthouse, that he can't tweet outside the courthouse, there has to be other measures that are available. And Nebraska Association specifically says you must use every measure available to avoid restricting free speech. If you're afraid that he's
about Nebraska Press Association.
You told me about Nebraska Association.
Right. So here's an arrow for your quiver. In the Alex Jones civil case, Alex was giving press conferences on the courthouse steps during trial. And the other side, the plaintiffs, they tipped their hat in the direction of a gag order. And we filed a brief making the argument you just made, that Alex wasn't an officer of the court. He didn't sign up for the fight. He was dragged in. It was civil, not criminal, making it less compelling than the case you have. But I think that's your best argument, although he is a trial participant, he didn't consent to the court's jurisdiction. It was imposed on him. And so I think a plaintiff might be in a different position. A plaintiff might be in the position, or the people of New York in a criminal case, of
more akin to a lawyer
signed on. But the person who's been dragged in, I think you're probably right, and I'd love to see that issue get in front of the Supreme Court. A non-voluntary participant in litigation. This is how you might frame the question. Does a non-voluntary participant in civil or criminal litigation sacrifice his First Amendment right to criticize the proceedings? Yes or no? And I think your argument is no, and I think you're right. I'd certainly support that argument. I can also understand the courts trying to impose that rule. I can understand why Mershon is doing it, and I hope your issue gets preserved and somebody gets to argue it up top, because it's a great argument.
Ron Baruti is my counsel, and he's very confident that while he expects we're going to lose throughout in New York, both at the appellate division level and at the Court of Appeals, he's very confident that we can get the Supreme Court to grant cert on this issue. And
so it's a nice issue. I mean, my screwing around with it in the Jones case and the Fotis Dulos case where I got gagged in Connecticut. I spent some time with those cases, looked at your papers. I think you're onto something. I wish you well.
Thank you, my brother.
There's a distinction here, and I'd like to make sure we're clear on this, because what you're talking about too is a citizen versus a governmental entity, which, the rights, the enumerated rights, the government doesn't have a First Amendment protection. It protects citizens, persons, and for the state to say they have a right to a fair trial is improper, because the burden of proof in a criminal case is unfair. But yet that's the burden. It's the state doesn't have, they have enumerated rights that are elucidated by the Constitution, but protections, the shield of the Constitution goes only to individual citizens. And so for the state to say, well, we have a right to a fair trial and blah, 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 blah. No, that is not the case. And the shield is only for citizens. I'm just make sure that distinction is preserved.
See, I tried making that argument that you're making here, my friend. And I was told, you know what, sometimes, like in the mob case, that is that we do allow gag orders in order to stop them from engaging. And that's why I had to draw that distinction between the attempted conspiracy to commit murder versus the situation that the left, and you have to look from the leftist perspectives, what they think is happening here with Trump communicating to MAGA.
This is a little bit longer conversation. I did discuss this on my channel a while back, but there's a pyramid, a hierarchy of qualitative versions. So there are a lot of people say, well, I'm a First Amendment absolutist, but in fact, political speech is the highest form of protected speech, and it goes down to commercial speech, to obscenity, all the way down, right? But at the tip of that spear, the most protected speech is political speech. And the right to criticize your government, petition to government grievances, and to right to speak against what your government is doing is the highest form of speech that can be, and so should be afforded the maximum amount of protection.
Nothing to go on from what Steve was saying. I mean, not only is that the highest protected speech, but it also, the whole argument that it should be gagged presupposes that people are too stupid to go, oh, I hear this person talking, but I can make my own decision. And I find that the most offensive part, that they just assume that if you hear something, you somehow lose all objectivity and ability to think for yourself and come to a conclusion as a juror as to what the facts show. And
that goes to the whole First Amendment idea, is that there's some ideas that are so dangerous we can't speak them.
Well,
and those are the ones that need to
push back. To push back, suppose it's inadmissible impeachment. I mean, let's talk about propensity evidence. Let's say your guy is on trial for bank robbery, but he's got a child porn conviction, and it's not going to come in unless he testifies, and then it might come in as an unnamed felony because of the prejudicial effect of hearing CP. So if somebody stands on the courthouse steps and says, this witness who's going to testify tomorrow, he's convicted of child porn, and the jury's never going to hear that. I mean, there are some things that I think are so prejudicial you don't unhear them. And I think that's the policy instinct that informs the gag orders. I mean, I hear Joe's point about crimes, and certainly, that makes sense. I mean, and there's already a prohibition against conspiring to commit a crime. But in terms of just out and out truthful statements that are inadmissible, that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where it makes the hard cases, I think.
By the way, Norm, please keep using CP instead, because I can't unhear that, nor the YouTube censors.
CP.
Thank you. Just wanted to point that out.
This is the problems with platforming a rookie.
We're working on it. We're working on it.
Norm's just thinking, it ain't my channel.
Oh God, yeah. There's a list of them, but yeah, please use that. Change the subject. And speaking of trials that are going on right now, Jeff, please catch us up on this whole Karen Reed trial.
Oh,
what is going on? It seems kind of insane just from the little bit that I was looking at on your channel this morning.
Oh, sweet baby dumpster Jesus. I don't even know where to start on this one. Oh my Lord. No, this is, I knew this was going to be a very, very rough case for the prosecution going in, but I had zero idea it would be such a brutal defense beatdown that they're just wishing for the sweet, soothing lube of Vaseline. It's rough. You have this situation where it's such an incestuous relationship with what's going on with the Boston police force. I mean, you've got the defendant, the girlfriend of a dead Canton police officer who died allegedly on the front lawn of the homeowner of another Boston Canton police officer. His brother was apparently one of the investigators, so they got conflicted out. It got assigned over to the state police in Massachusetts, assigned to Michael Proctor, who is the state police lead investigator, whose mother is a very close family member of the police officer homeowner.
Affair.
Yeah.
It's a family affair.
The independent state police officer, his mother calls the police officer whose home where the other police officer's body was found her second family. Their son is in the wedding party for. I mean, it's amazing. And they had the last one that Eric saw on the trial this morning. This firefighter paramedic.
Can we talk about that for a minute? Because I found it okay. There was no jury present, and they were questioning her. And this is my outside perspective, but I feel like by getting all the questioning in or lacrosse in without the jury there helps prep her for whatever is crossed in front of the jury. So it kind of steals half the thunder of the lawyer. And can you explain the whole situation, then tell me if I'm right or wrong, in my opinion?
That was all, that was all setting up impeachment evidence against this firefighter EMT lady who was saying she was only a passing acquaintance, not a friend, not a close friend, just an acquaintance of the daughter of the police officer who was the homeowner where the body of the other police officer was found. They sent the jury out because the defense lawyer was saying, look, I happen to have a stack of photographs here of you drinking together, going to beach parties together, going on trips together, going on all these together. To lay out this foundation for an incredible, just an epic impeachment of this officer who was saying, I don't know her. I'm not friends with the officer who probably did this and whose house was the forum where the body was found.
How about the Venmo screenshot that I sent you too? That didn't seem to come up, but that's kind of damning in my opinion. Like, I understand a Facebook friend, but a Venmo friend, that means cash is getting exchanged. That's a closer relationship.
And of course, as with any good / bad witness, depending how you're looking at it, once they get on cross-examination or this impeachment examination, they automatically get the most horrific form of amnesia you've ever seen. Where was this picture taken? Oh, I don't remember. What year was this picture taken? I don't remember.
It looks old.
Yeah, no, wait. Let's be fair. I was on the witness stand yesterday in a case involving a claim by a former client that I'd taken a habeas corpus petition for, and I'd agreed to take a habeas corpus petition for, and he had complaints about how our office had handled his file. So the next thing you know, I'm on the witness stand and I'm being shown a letter. And, evidentiary foundations matter. I mean, if you're a non-lawyer, you're used to watching TV. Did you write this document? And it just comes in. But foundations are the mother milk of trial lawyering. And the pros are separated from the rookies in terms of mastery of the evidence code. So I've got a lawyer there. He shows me a letter. Do you recognize the letterhead? Yes. Whose letterhead is it? Yours. He moves the letter into evidence. That doesn't come in because the contents of the letter are what was necessary. So then somebody objects. Then he asked me to read the letter. Does that refresh your recollection? I wrote a letter, yes. And no, it was 8 years ago. He moves the letter in. Admissible. Then he asks me to recall the date that I wrote the letter on. And this is where I jumped in. I didn't mean to cut you off, but refreshed recollection doesn't mean that you read a document and repeat what you saw. Refreshed recollection means you look at a document and you go, oh yeah, now I recall. Well, I write so many letters in a year. I looked at that and I said, no, I don't recall. And, and people were looking at me like, how can you not recall the date you wrote a letter on? Easy. I can't.
This was a little different though. This was, like I said, the firefighter paramedic who allegedly heard the victim say, I hit him with her car vehicle, who was in a blue bikini with the daughter of the owner of the home wrapped around each other, holding a beer and drinking together.
By the way, she said it looked like a high school picture. And so they're drinking the beer in high school, but
she couldn't even tell the year the picture was taken. And she's only 28 years old.
All right.
She didn't know the year it was taken, the location it was taken, what time of, even though she's wearing a bikini, she couldn't tell you what time of year it was taken in Massachusetts.
Didn't know if there's a beach or not.
Yeah, she didn't know it was a beach because there was no beach showing in the picture. It was just bad. But I think it worked out the proper way. The judge said, "Look, you've violated the rules of criminal procedure on submitting pre-trial documents. You missed your deadline, so you're not going to get the pictures in, but we're still going to allow you to ask the same questions without the pictures there." And she did the same thing. She had complete amnesia on the stand until she was given some little redirect by the prosecution, and then she sort of remembered stuff. It was bad. It was ugly. This is just that she's the second witness that's had a complete amnesia of anything to do with the case once the cross-examination starts, and it's playing out. It has to be playing out horrifically badly for the prosecution in front of the jury. I can't imagine any of it.
What are your actual thoughts on the case? It seems like in the legal community, or law too, whatever you want, that they pretty much think that she didn't do it, that it's almost impossible, but I don't know.
Oh, I think it goes beyond the law tube community. They've had to initiate this 200-yard buffer around the courthouse to keep all of the people that are protesting in favor of a criminal defendant who is on trial for murdering a police officer. They're filling the courtroom with her supporters. Her supporters are creating this massive spectacle outside. That's how much groundswell there is against this alleged corruption in the Boston or Canton Police Department. This is just my personal theory. I think they were all drinking. There's no question everybody was drinking. Karen Reed drops her boyfriend off, goes home. Boyfriend goes in. He's not liked by the other cops. They get in a little altercation. There's a couple of punching because there's evidence that he has swollen right cheek. There's some bruising. His eye is bulging, and he has a radiating, like, kind of spider webbish fracture on the back of his skull and some apparently animal bite or scratch marks on his arm. I think they got in a fight. Something happened. You punch the guy in the head. He falls back, hits his head on the hardwood floor, whatnot. And they go, "Holy crap, the guy's dead. What do we do now?" They throw his body out in the snow, and they blame the ex-girlfriend because it's all a bunch of cops, firefighters, EMTs, and family and friends in the house when this happens. They take the easy way out.
Norm, somebody in my locals asked about Thurman versus the city of Torrington, if you've heard of that case and if this might be similar.
Well, I don't know the Boston case. I think the Thurman versus the city of Torrington had to do with a domestic assault, and it's right at the tip of my tongue. So have your listener give me another
severe domestic abuse. Husband was a cop. She got no help from town and sued.
Thurman case. Thurman. So the two most difficult stops for police officers are at a domestic and a motor vehicle stop. At a domestic, you just don't know what you're going to see, what's going to happen coming out of the car. In a motor vehicle stop, a couple that hates one another is ready to kill one another, are ready to kill one another until the cop walks in, and then they're going to kill the cop because they're embarrassed and it's us against the world. And so in the Thurman case, that case changed the law in Connecticut. Police officers are now required to make an arrest when they're at a home, and if they see evidence of a domestic violence, they must make an arrest to separate the parties. But candidly, I just don't know enough about the Massachusetts case to draw an analogy. I just know that's the fact pattern in Thurman.
Okay. I was asking in the background which case to talk up next, and this is a good one. It's not really a case; it's an assignment, I guess, if you will, that the DEA is going to reschedule marijuana or cannabis from class 1 to class 3 or whatever it is. Mike, do you want to break that down?
So this has been something that's been percolating for a while. And I think a lot of people are interested generally in the status of marijuana federally or cannabis federally. I know that on my side of things in the business and transactional world, especially dealing in sort of the regulatory consumer packaged goods space, this is something that
what's the law in North Carolina for right now? Is it recreational state or medical state or
neither of the two?
It's sacramental. You got to have it to wake up in that state and not want to kill yourself.
Yeah, it still, it still satisfies all of the original edginess of weed here in North Carolina, with some exception to, I guess, the criminality attached to possession and stuff like that. But
reefer madness is still a thing.
Kind of, not really. I mean, you got to remember, we got Carolina, Duke, NC State all here, so it's not as if we're as backwoods as Norm likes to think. But in general,
I'm from Utah, so hey, reefer madness is a step down from Utah. So.
You guys barely have alcohol in Utah. I mean, barely. Anyway, so the DEA
barely have electricity in Utah. Right?
Oh.
I
got two houses, my house and the outhouse. Which one you want to go to?
Oh boy.
Well,
he's not wrong.
The Controlled Substances Act schedules drugs. We know that.
Schedule, that's right. Sorry.
Marijuana is Schedule 1, so up there with some of the most, aggressive, and has always been. The DEA has announced that it intends to reschedule it to Schedule 3, so it'll be something akin to like steroid use and certain other iterations of like over-the-counter medicine that has some other stuff like that. Anyway, I think the conversation around this is whether anybody really cares. I think I'm fascinated by sort of the malaise of weed, because it certainly here in my experience in the United States certainly feels like weed is de facto legal. So, but it also feels like the product of marijuana has shifted dramatically into something that is historically has not been as potent as it is right now.
Right. Ironically, it's shifting down as the actual substance has gotten purified to a much, much stronger degree.
Correct. So I'm interested in it from sort of the that dynamic, as well as what it means for this administration, the Biden administration, as he seeks re-election, whether something like this is a move to perhaps marshal and whip votes in his direction from a certain demographic, certain age groups and stuff like that.
I'm curious, because I've always wondered this, and this is me speaking as again, non-lawyer, but I've always wondered if we are headed for a constitutional crisis or collusion when you have something like Washington State and Oregon, both legalized like 100% recreational, everything else. But if you take cannabis across the border from Washington to Oregon, you're breaking federal law. Is this a way to kind of push that down the line so we don't run into that problem of, how can you have one state be legal, another state be legal, go back and forth, but then you're breaking the federal law? Or am I just way off base with my questioning?
I've always come at it from a perspective of banking, because banking is federally regulated.
That too, yeah.
But there, I think there was what's known as the Cole memo that has gone in and out of popularity based on whatever presidential administration is in power. I think Trump's Department of Justice rescinded what's known as the Cole memo, which was all about reporting requirements for the banking industry with respect to establishing new accounts that could be connected to illicit activity, namely marijuana businesses, and then ongoing reports about that. I've been curious for a long time. I mean, like you said, Colorado, New York. That's the banking capital of the United States is Manhattan. And then, of course, California, its perspective on weed. A lot of weed that makes its way all over the United States in whatever form comes by way of California through the mail. So I've just been really interested, I think, from a federal perspective, if we got the FDIC regulated, federally regulated banking system, how the system of cannabis and the value chain even really exists without the participation of the major banks.
You work in beer, right, or craft beer, so alcohol. I'm curious. Does North Carolina still have blue laws in some areas? I think Virginia does, and I'm curious if there's parallels here.
Blue laws such as dry counties. Is that your?
Yes.
So no, North Carolina did it one time. There were a couple of holdout counties. North Carolina is actually perhaps the most progressive state in the greater Southeast when it comes to beverage alcohol regulation.
In other words, it's got more drunks per capita than any other state.
I'm talking from a business friendly environment, right? Okay. So for the ability to vertically integrate. So alcohol is interesting, and I think it informs. The reason this would be relevant to the weed discussion, the marijuana discussion, is because we do have to ask ourselves, if there is a federal legalization effort, how the states and how companies are going to sort of organize themselves and how it will be regulated, because the same issues in the marketplace would pop up as did alcohol, pre and post prohibition, which necessitated the formation of what we know as the 3-tier system, aka separating producers from wholesalers from the retail market to ensure monopolization doesn't occur at the point of sale. And in North Carolina, small producers are authorized to kind of vertically integrate, to act as a producer, a wholesaler, and a retailer direct to consumers to a much greater degree than its counterpart states in the Southeast. And that's frankly, that's why I have a practice that's that thrives in that area.
Okay. I am curious to see how this is going to go, and it can be a touchy subject, obviously.
Yeah, breweries are asking all the time. Producers of beverage alcohol products are asking all the time what the status is because of the hemp, the farm bill, right? And then the development of CBD. Now, Delta 9 THC.
Delta 9 is kind of creepy because Delta 9 is literally THC with one molecule removed, from what I understand, and there could be some potential very negative health effects because of the manipulation in the material.
Sure, but what the consumer is asking for now, I think that CBD really introduced this idea of like wellness and stress relief and sleep help or whatever it was that the FDA would not be okay with, or the FTC would be okay with small companies marketing about. But in general, I think the consumer has agreed on two things. Number one, it does not necessarily care about CBD. It wants something that is psychoactive. It wants an intoxicant, right? A la beer, wine, liquor.
You mean
right?
It doesn't want like NA alcohol? Shocking.
Well, it does want NA alcohol, but in terms of something that is branded itself as being hemp or hemp adjacent or THC adjacent, they want something that has an intoxicating effect, right? We've dispatched with the belief that people are into wellness within that category, or that's the same market. They're not necessarily the same market. The other thing they said is they want it in beverage form, primarily, which puts a stress on the infrastructure in the U.S. that produces beverages, right, to ask the question of how do we lawfully do this, right? And so when the DEA comes out and says we're thinking about descheduling something like cannabis, and there's already a groundswell of questions and first movers, it does create an environment where you have a TTB, so the Alcohol Tax and Trade Bureau, basically the branch of the IRS that collects taxes from illicit goods like beer and wine and liquor, right? Whatever. They obviously have regulated alcohol to be only alcohol. You're not going to introduce any other drug into alcohol, at least not lawfully. So, but now you have a situation where these tax-paid bonded facilities that are regulated by the TTB, regulated at the state level, are now asking themselves how they bring in a drug into that regulated environment and then produce it for consumers in the retail value chain. So paying attention to that stuff. I know it's not particularly interesting and kind of killed the vibe here in the chat. So I apologize, gentlemen, but
No, I think it's fascinating. I mean, I don't understand why anybody would want to engage in any liquid intoxicant to relax here or anything. I don't know.
What time is it there, Legal?
It's 2 a.m. on a Friday
okay.
night.
Well, then you have more than enough reason.
I'm behind schedule.
Yeah, there you go.
I was going to say something.
Everybody probably knows I don't. How is it you came to live in South Korea?
Oh my God, I was a Mormon missionary for 2 years back in 1988, and then I was immediately. That was obviously back in a former life, but then I came back as an exchange student immediately for a couple of years. Then I went to law school, and then I got a job offer during my 3L year, and I've been here ever since. So basically, 35 years here.
So you're making up for lost time.
Did you get married in South Korea?
Yeah, married and divorced. Cool.
Damn, I knew I should. Okay, no, I should asking these personal questions. You never know where they go. But did you get married to a South Korean?
Yeah, I mean, back when I was here, there wasn't many foreigners here. Now there's a lot of foreigners here, but yeah, there was very few of us back in the day.
Do you speak Korean?
Oh yeah, I mean, God, if I didn't after living 2/3 of my life here, there'd be a problem.
How tall are you, if I may ask, to see how far you stick out in South Korea?
5'11" and a half.
Oh, you're I was going to say, bring up Eric, if you can. This is why I might have looked distracted for a little bit. This video was just posted by who's the Rep Mike Collins, and there's accusations of racism flying. And listen.
Alex Jones was talking about it earlier, but watch very closely on the right side of the screen.
A dude in a blue shirt.
Right, he just pops in. It's very brief. Here.
Oh God.
Okay, now, but I don't want to be
Now,
I don't want to be, what's the word, contrarian for the sake. I'm not trying to be contrarian for the sake of contrarian. If you listen to it, because I was listening to it over and over again, you hear other kids chanting who in the background. Yeah. And so I look, before we have another Covington kid situation, I not that anyone's going to believe him if he says I was just doing a sports chant, because it looks bad, but it sounds like it might have been more stupid, like soccer hooliganism than anything racially motivated. But I don't know. Ready for the next scandal.
I mean, was that a woo like whoop whoop whoop,
or
like
a chimpanzee,
or yes, or yeah?
How about the
question of
fact
fact? A
so
question of fact for the jury.
Everybody's so hypersensitive to the slightest little ticky-tacky insight. Meanwhile, the country burns.
That's the point, Steve.
Get over it. Give it a break. Let people be what they want. He's on the street. Well, he can do whatever he wants. I don't know what he's thinking. Who cares? But it's like, but they want to hoist. This has got to be the topic now to dominate our media. This is the problem with the dominated left-wing media and the monolithic narrative thing is they find confirmation bias in everything. So whatever they see, it's like same thing. That's the trap of the Covington kids, which we have obviously not learned.
Well, and I still think that if she would have been really upset, she probably could have taken that little shit in at least 2 out of 3 rounds.
Well, I don't. Did she even see it?
I'm confused by this comment. Yes, I believe hate speech is legal
in America.
I'm confused. What's your point?
I want to know what define the terms.
But I wasn't here to say I think that there should be I'm becoming of the view that there should be hate speech limitations, but we'll save that for
really.
I did prime the panel for that.
Yes, and I was like, oh, he's not here, and because
disclaimer.
You will be standing probably alone. I have a feeling on that view, Norm. So I know
there's a really good argument.
That bothers me a lot.
I need to hear more.
I do too. This is
all right. So here,
okay, hold on. You can't just my stance on that. I think that was a bad move, and it looked really bad what the person did. Did I say they couldn't do that? No, they can run around, they can look stupid, they can make all the hate comments they want. Is that clear?
But how much projection is going on here? I don't know what that kid's thinking. I don't know what he's saying. I mean, it's like in the mind, it's like people project onto the other, well, you must be thinking this. I mean, it's like, wait a second, that's coming out of your mind. That's not what this kid is thinking.
Well, that's what communication is, though. That's what symbolic speech is. No. I mean,
you
strike a pose. And
well, that's the old Bill Burr thing. You say the N-word, and you're making me think that word in my head because you don't have the guts to say it. You're putting the onus on me to think that word. So
Norm, I'll just tell Norm, this is the end game of hate speech laws in Canada. They're trying to define. Well, it's been defined by the Supreme Court. Quote, the content of a communication that expresses detestation or vilification of an individual or group of individuals on the basis of a prohibited grounds of discrimination. And it further clarifies that is not detestation or vilification if the content solely expresses disdain or dislike. I mean, or it seeks to discredit, humiliate, hurt, or offend. I mean, it's such an idiotic thing to attempt to define, and it seems like we'll talk about it in 45 minutes. But
that's like 98% of what I say, though.
it's like 99% of
that's
the
why
internet.
You live in South Korea, right?
Okay, now I'm not starting the Exodus, but I'm going to go back out and Norm, I got to get my questions ready for you, so I'll see you at 2:00.
Yeah, and I'll have to go put my makeup on soon too. We're on it too. Right?
All right, people. 2:00.
Ready for my close up, Mr. DeMille.
Nice to see everybody. I'm checking out.
See you later.
I want to hear the arguments for this hate speech stuff.
All right, but we've already got a note that somebody hates the panel, so be prepared. You'll hate it even more in a moment, especially moi. So, I'm kind of a First Amendment guy. I've done my time in First Amendment cases and been tried to get in front of the U.S. Supreme Court a couple times on various cases, including Alex Jones's preliminarily on a gag order issue and on some true threats cases And I think I understand the law reasonably well, that is that the First Amendment limits what the government can do as to speech. And there are certain classes of speech that are that are not permitted. Criminal conspiracy, incitement to commit a crime, true threats, fighting words,
Obscenity.
and et cetera. And obscenity in particular, and that'll become relevant in a moment. And so the value of speech, and Steve, you talked earlier about the hierarchy, political speech being at the very top. Probably at the bottom of that, at the bottom of that period is expressive speech merely intended to express the speaker's viewpoint. And I think what gives speech at least one form of justification or utility when it's protected is its ability to advance information, to advance competing ideas about the good or good life or scientific information. In the obscenity context, we say that some speech is lacks some expressive activity lacks any compelling social, political, artistic, aesthetic, scientific value at all. And I'm coming to the conclusion that that hate speech, however defined, and I'm glad David's not here to ridicule me with the Canadian definition, lacks utility, but does cause harm. And so for example, there was a utterance on a campus reported in some newspaper this week, kill the Palestinians or kill the Jews. My wife is Jewish. If I'm walking in a public place and a person is standing 10 feet away saying, let's kill all the Jews, that's not exactly going to make her feel like, gee, what a wonderful expressive activity this person is going to feel. It's not a true threat within the meaning of the law because it's not saying kill this Jew, there's a Jew, kill her. So it lacks the imminence and immediacy of a true threat or of an incitement. But yet in terms of what it contributes to public discourse, I think it contributes nothing. And so I would be open, and I this week announced to Mike's chagrin and shock and horror that on our podcast that I would be open to experimenting with a legal doctrine, perhaps modeled on the obscenity theory about.
We might get kicked off, or I would show where the knife actually came through.
Here's the thing.
Sternum, right on the other side, when he thrust it in earlier this week.
But it was done with love and kindness, Mike, and we showed respect for one another.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I think there's the devil's in the details.
No, I get it.
Well, what's really important here, I think, Norm, is because I've been listening to this more than our co-panelists here. So you take a utilitarian approach to your analysis, right? At a foundational level, you're looking at
a consequentialist view. Yeah.
Okay. And I think that is, I think that's going to be the most difficult bridge to build within this discussion, because I think I admitted to you that in the current era, I said something to the effect of, the only way out of our moment right now is through. And so how do we define our moment? We live in an era that is fraught with instantaneous communication. We just saw a video that was how many seconds long, and it's viral, creating more conversation and discourse around motives and imperatives of race and whatever else on college campuses. And that's not really how real life plays out. We live in a world now where speech is just sort of curtailed and sort of synthesized and pushed around. I think my major pushback is obviously and Steve, you brought the term vagueness, void for vagueness into the discussion with respect to House Bill 6090. It's that, and it's also knowing that the current environment that this particular issue is being discussed within has seen a response that says that definition can change constantly, and at any given time, it is not what it might be right now, and it won't be that way ever again. So it's always a moving target. So if we're going to set a basis for some sort of hate speech exception to the First Amendment, how are we going to effectively do that? By first courting an issue that admittedly from the side attempting to get it banned as hate speech is fine, saying that it's a moving target, that nobody is going to be
easy. Look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of prohibited classes. Its Speech Act can be a discriminatory act. I mean, that's one way of resolving that problem. And the fact that it's a difficult standard to determine, the fact that it has to be resolved on an ad hoc basis, that's why we have courts. That's why
hold on, Norm, using the civil rights aspect, you can't turn down services technically based on race, right? But that doesn't mean that the person who is forced to provide that said service can't say just the nastiest, disparaging comments the whole time while they're allowing the person to get the service, correct? Because
I'm not sure about
separation of speech and service.
No, I'm not sure about that, because there are hostile environment claims, And so, let's say your restaurant says no Greeks allowed, and I walk in and you say, you hot dog cart sodomizing creep, the Turk should have killed all of you. By the way, would you like some mustard with your hot dog? I mean, I might feel a little impeded to come in and buy at your store. I might feel that you've created a hostile environment. And within the context of discrimination claims, there are hostile work environment claims.
But that's a work. You said work environment. So you're not an employee. Look, you're a customer, and you have an option to go somewhere else. This is kind of like forcing somebody to bake the cake that they don't believe in. So, we want the Jewish person to bake the Nazi cake or otherwise. That doesn't.
I agree.
It doesn't fly.
I'm not there yet, but I've crossed the divide, and I'll bring you more and better reasoning on it later. But I am open to the possibility that's necessary, because I will, Mike. And
you'll make a more ferocious and concise argument, but I don't know if it'll be better than what you're offering now. Look. Joe, I know you're teaming over there. It's the last thing I'll say, because I want to make sure that the full context is addressed here. I am concerned that in the wake of the January 6th prosecutions, in particular for the Proud Boys for seditious conspiracy, and the grounds that the government was able to prove to a jury were adequate to convict underneath that federal statute, that a conspiracy to commit a criminal act could be instantaneous, right, among people.
As I'm writing that brief right now.
But let me at least string this together. And then we have the bill that was just passed and will become law, that is going to mandate, and among other things, the forced sale of TikTok, right, to an American company, but also strapped with it a super invasive regime of additional surveillance, right? And so what I've called the Patriot Act 2.0, which will basically deputize individuals around the country at the behest of state actors to surveil and report and to open their Wi-Fi, their data, without any adjudication, without any initial due process. So the internet is being deputized. The individuality within the internet is being deputized on behalf of the state. And then now we have an exception to the First Amendment, grounded in a hate speech category that is inherently vague. We'll call it. I'll be generous and call it vague, right? And so all of these things are happening at the exact same time.
Just as vague as the Fourth Amendment prohibition on reasonable searches and unreasonable.
Look, you and I agree that based on what happened with in Dobbs, that everything under the penumbra.
Mike, here's the Babe Ruth moment. Pointing to center field. Within 3 years, there's going to be this case in front of the Supreme Court. It may not be me, but there will. Within 3 years.
And so I agree with you on
Joe's
that.
stroking out. Joe's stroking out.
Joe's smelling burnt toast over there.
Yeah, let Joe go. Come on.
Imagine how you feel, Joe, right now, and just know that I do it 5 days a week, every day, 8 a.m., 30 minutes a day with my man here. No, it's usually not like this. This is funny because
this isn't bad.
No, this is good.
It's
stressful. It's stressful because you're a serious attorney. You're dangerous, right? You're effective at what you do, and the proof is in the pudding. So the fact that you are communicating that to us that you have crossed the Rubicon, right, is notable at least. But those three things acting together form the basis of my, I think, real concern over the future of how this will be deployed. And
I just got a carrier pigeon with a note from Joe. Let me read it. Fuck
Go
you,
ahead, Joe.
you Greek prick.
Joe, I'm tagging you in.
I wish I had Norm's faith in the judicial process to adjudicate this issue.
That's
with it. I'm right now in a fight suing a judge because they can't handle when to issue a gag order and limit that speech. And you're telling me that we should have confidence that this is not going to be abused by the courts in very short order?
When is it ever not abused?
So that's why this is such a dangerous road to hoe. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, whatever yardstick you think may be appropriate for judging or legislating hate speech, imagine that the phrase that you're trying to ban, that the minority you're trying to protect is Nazis. And if you can find hate speech that you're willing to ban and say this is an illegal thing to say about Nazis, then you have something potentially. because it should be any group, not this minority A,
No,
B,
I
C,
hear
D,
you right.
or E.
It should
But
be
it
a
should apply to
general rule.
white people. It should apply to the patriarchy. It should apply to men. It should apply to any group, not specialized on the fact that they are quote unquote a minority. If you want to tell me that,
I didn't
that's
take that
fine.
view. I don't.
No,
see
I know
the
you
social
didn't.
Utility. I don't see the social utility in any person standing in a public place saying, "Let's kill all X."
Well, see, I think
don't
that's where
see
the
it.
difference is.
That's not what- so this is
That's a
important.
Kantian categorical imperative compared to a utilitarian consequentialist approach. I mean, the greater
Maybe not. I mean, no. I think you guys. You guys. I don't want to do it this way. I think there is a view of the First Amendment that it is that it's categorical, and that as Hugo Black said, Congress shall make no law means make no law. But we make them all the time, and we make them for consequentialist reasons because we want to live in a certain sort of society. And so I'm saying that the presence of hatred and expressive hatred, at least in my view, gives good consequentialist grounds to search for a workable standard. I don't have it, and Joe, you're right. There never will be one, and there'll be endless bits of litigation and endless room for manipulation and misuse of the judicial process. But to quote my favorite apostle, the Apostle Paul, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. I mean, it's a fallen world. If you want paradise, wait to die, and maybe you'll live in the city of God. But if you're living in the city of man, you're going to live in tension with one another, and our institutions are going to be imperfect. But we have in the United States fractured power, so that we can continue to debate ways and means to create a good life. I'm simply saying I want to put the need for hate speech regulation on the table and have serious discussions about it. Maybe it goes nowhere, and that I'm persuaded 5 months, a year from now, that I went on a useless toot. But I'm putting it on the table, and I ain't backing down.
By the way, this super chat is for you, Norm. It's in reply. You said, "What is the utility for ever saying kill all blank?" And
blowing off steam, call to war. It might. And the argument about suppressing it is that steam's going to go somewhere and perhaps into action. The argument for regulating it is too many calls make the act normalize the action, and so it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other kind of thing. I may be wrong, but it's on the table.
I like the comment, the Attorney Full Employment Act.
Well, there is that. Yeah, there is that.
Well, I this is an honest question, I guess, from the utilitarian point of view. If we look at the greater good, but isn't there the need? Isn't the person we need to protect the one that doesn't fall within the what the mob, what the majority thinks is right? Shouldn't we be protecting the one that's outside of that?
Yeah.
Yes.
And also,
but we don't do it always. I mean, we say of people who abuse children, there are reasons for going to take you outside of the protection. We say of people who abuse animals, the same thing. I think you can say of people who abuse speech in certain contexts, defamation and so forth. You have a right to speak, but you'll pay consequences. I think as a society devoted to the development of civil norms, we have the ability to say this much and no more. And, yes, there's a tremendous possibility. I'll always defend the heterodox. That's how I'm put together. I'm a lifelong contrarian. And so I'm at tension with that. It's just, it's something Mike and I started kicking around this week, and I'm watching people's reaction thinking, wow, welcome to my twilight
I think we're
zone.
probably ill-equipped on this stream to even get at the answer to this question. But I have an intuition about the real failure that maybe we've overlooked here with respect to anti-Semitism as the subject of the hate speech legislation. The issue is necessarily that most people are going to default to an example like we've brought forth on the stream, right? All X should, be unalived, etc., that kind of thing. In reality, what we're dealing with in modern discourse is something far more diluted and inoffensive, just normal conversation. There's no way for the average person to even know that they have walked into the forest of whatever umbrella of hateful speech, right? That's the reality of the situation. True. Is that the pushback, primarily, I think the instinctive pushback from sort of the populist right on this is that we have already endured over the last decade overt censorship efforts from tech companies that we largely put trust in and funneled a lot of resources and money into and helped them gain market share, only for them to turn back around and push us to the margins of discourse.
Also, Michael, keep in mind, you just said the last 10 years, which is a great point. Now, I'm also old. I turned 54 this year. It wasn't always the right who was down. It was the left before.
Like I said.
So it just goes back and forth, and it's always one side or the other. And that's why you have to deal with really offensive people. A lot of times the offensive people are the ones who may have a point, and they do change things over time. And Norm, I got to push at you on this one, because you're supposed to be studying to be a comedian. As a comedian, you should be searching for the most offensive, wide open speech possible, because the comedians help train us to see the humor in what we are doing, and they are at the edges.
Okay, so let's talk about reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions, and this will prove Joe's point about it being an unworkable standard. You don't have to look far on the internet to see my boulderization of what's his name, George Carlin using the N-word at an event monitored by the NAACP, where I had to be escorted from the room after it brought down the house and nearly caused a fist fight. Don't put it on the screen, please.
I will not do that.
No, but I mean, and it was, as a comedic enterprise, it failed. It was artless, and I didn't do a good job at it. But I would say that if a comic gets up and uses the N-word at a nightclub, categorically, there's no prohibition against using it. But if a person goes into a public square and starts saying, "Let's kill all the N's," there's a difference. I think there's a qualitative difference. Doing something for ironic effect or satirical effect, or to shed light on hypocrisy, that's what a comic does. But
now you're having to define it. When is it? Because now, and again, here's the problem. Sorry, Norm.
Reasonable time, place, and
no, I don't think it's reasonable. I don't think it's ever reasonable. I think you're Gilbert Godfrey. You need to be canceled tomorrow because you made a 9/11 joke the day after it happened about a flight. So
maybe I'm wrong. I'm listening.
Slippery slope is called a fallacy, but it's one of those funny ones because it's also true.
No, I hear you. I get it.
Can I jump in real quick and try to mediate this discussion and defend my fellow contrarian, even though I disagree with him? And then I think what Norm is saying here, and there is a point to be made, and that is that there is the absolutist First Amendment position is untenable, but yet as conservatives, and we tend to be pro-free speech, we want individual rights, and he is saying that there are arguments on both sides. So there's issues there's issues on either side, and he's making an argument that there are arguments that exist for restrictions and this sort of thing. Now, the problem is that conservatives are a naturally reactionary, and we react strongly against that because we are at the tip of the spear of these hate speech laws, because we know it will be turned around immediately by the institutions to attack and censor us. And also, I appreciate what you're saying and having that kind of discussion. The problem is that it presupposes good faith arguments on the other side, when in fact they're not operating in good faith. It's simply if they can advance the ball and then weaponize law against conservatives even more, they're going to do it. So you're coming at it with good faith and good heart and saying, look, there's arguments on both sides. But then what happens is now you've conceded ground. They're going to take the ball and they're going to spike it down your throat. And all of a sudden we're January 6th.
But Steve, why is absolutism untenable?
Because as Norm points out, there are restrictions on speech. There's criminal.
We're echoing that.
We're echoing like crazy. Hold on. Everybody mute themselves.
We're echoing like crazy.
Echo. Can you hear me now? No.
That's settling. Yeah, if you get an echo like that, everybody mute themselves real quickly. Because it's
the absolutist position is untenable because there are reasonable restrictions. When you have criminal speech, for example, conspiracy is the fire in the crowded theater example, the fact that commercial speech can be regulated, the fact
we're still echoing, aren't you? Even while I was muted.
Hold on.
Obscenity is regulated. It is a slope. I mean, the top of the pyramid, as we've discussed, is political speech, but there are gradations of speech all the way from absolutely protected to criminalized. And we need to understand it's a very complex area of law. And Norm's pointing out that there are issues on both sides, but I think that there are also reasonable fears that treading down that road will result in more tyranny against conservatives.
Well, perhaps we should even we should lend some credit to Ron Coleman as well. He was a part of the slants SCOTUS decision because this implicates the Lanham Act as well. Speech is curtailed by and through the Lanham Act, which allows for companies and individuals to apply for and have trademark registrations on their brands and their names and stuff and to keep other users from using that out in the marketplace. And then that applied to what? Offensive speech. And just a few years ago, by and through the slants SCOTUS decision. So it's interesting that we're having this discussion now when we've actually turned the corner at the SCOTUS level, at least in the commercial context, just a few years ago.
I don't know how to say this without sounding like a complete madman, but maybe it's just from the fact. I mean, again, I'm a product of Utah, generations of ranchers. Like Yellowstone is sort of kind of the history of my family. Literally, my entire family history is in Afton, Wyoming, about an hour and a half south of Yellowstone National Park. That's literally 200 years of my family history. But I think the laws are the problem that's preventing absolutism from working. I think there should be an absolute First Amendment right, but as the saying goes, you should also have the absolute right to expect to be punched in the face if you tread on someone else's feelings. I mean, it's Newton's third law. There, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If you're going to say something that's so stupid and offensive to someone, you better be expecting to be punched in the face for it. And I don't think we need to be legislating that you can't say something and you can't have a reaction. I know that sounds like wild.
So would you eliminate the fighting words exception to the First Amendment protection?
This sounds really ridiculous, but yes, I would, because I think if you say the fighting words, you should expect to have someone fight you and punch you in the head for it.
So and the market should be self-regulating in that way. That's an interesting perspective. I hadn't thought of it that way.
I like that. I think maybe that's the only way I'm going to get on board with the platform.
That's ruled by the strong, so the big guy can speak, and the little guy and the woman who's cowering, she can't speak. So I don't think your solution is.
But again, it was 50.
That's why we have a Second Amendment, Steve.
It was 10 paces at high noon in the city square.
Well, you could delegate your fighting words exception, right? Or you should get away with it. You know what I mean? But you could delegate that to a third party, just like there's defense of self or defense of others, right?
Yeah. I'm just always in favor of less is more.
Well, we have to indulge some sort of intersectional hierarchy here, right? Then, I mean, we're having this again. This is all framed. This isn't like this is not a broad hate speech thing. I just want to remind us, we're talking about a very narrow, right, or a supposedly narrow stretch of the English language, and to that end, we're not talking about only hate speech. We're talking about hate speech within a very specific category, as opposed to any other category of potential hate speech.
That's why I'm saying it makes me sound like a madman for saying that, but I just feel at some fundamental level we should be able, just teach people correct principles, be nice to each other. And if you're not nice to each other, you should expect a swift and serious response.
Yeah. I mean, there are consequences to your actions. Absolutely. I'm going to go and wrap up on that before we have too many consequences here. Master Phillips, disciple number 7, gifted 5 laid back law memberships. Thank you very much. It's very generous of you to give these to other people. And I love these discussions. Obviously, they're fun. Let me move Joe to his place. And let's see, I don't even know how to say that. Darkalush G. Bingo legal vices, stop being weak, and bring back dueling. If you're going to appeal to the we did it before, therefore reasonable / acceptable. There is some element to that. Norm is muted.
Back to the state of nature, baby. Life is solitary, nasty, poor, brutish, and short. Thomas Hobbes.
There we go.
I'm a Lockean myself, but
So, Michael, what do you have coming up?
Law Pod Daily with Mr. Norm Pattis every Monday through Friday. You can find us on other platforms in addition to YouTube at Law Pod Daily. So our goal for over the weekend is to jump to over 3,000 subscribers. That's our stated goal as of this morning.
Wow.
It's quite elite, but Norm will be championing the Law Pod Daily colors on Viva Frey here in a few minutes. So looking forward to that. And then always happy to come here and hang out with you guys, learn a lot. So thank you.
Awesome. Jeff.
I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
It's late there.
I'm just doing my thing over there right now. We're doing Karen Reed when we can. We're going to be talking about the Titanic on Maritime Monday. We're just doing stuff. We're doing whatever tickles.
The Titanic, what happened?
No, we're just looking to whether or not Rose and Jack both could have fit on the goddamn door.
Okay. Those troubling, deep questions. Yeah. Steve, Mr. Gosney, have you written another book since last time I saw you?
Yes, actually, it's called Automatic Gardening, How to Create Simple Hydroponic System.
What?
I have incorporated this book into...
Wait, what is it called?
It's called Automatic Gardening, Why and How to Create a Simple Hydroponic System with Plans.
That's honest to God what I thought you said. Wow. Okay.
Yes. And I will say that has actually been incorporated as another chapter into Prepare, which is all, and I'm working on porting all my books to Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. So Debates and Prepare are both on Kindle Unlimited audiobook. All of my books, except for Brucey the One-Eyed Wonder Dog, are available on Amazon Unlimited download for free. So please go over to Amazon and check them out. I'm working on getting everything ported over there so that I can not have inventories of books, which is getting a little unmanageable. And I can walk away and be happy.
I have to say, just before you get to me here, I'm always amazed at how Steve is able to weigh in a book form about virtually any topic. And I would kind of actually riff on that and make a joke about it and come up with some bizarrely crazy topic that Steve's about to come out with a book with. And I would never come up with anything nearly as creative as hydroponic gardening for your specialty there. And well, God bless you, my brother. You are a Renaissance man with so many friggin' talents. I'm sitting here and I'm like, man, I'm just trying to master PUBG, and he's sitting here creating hydroponic gardens and telling me how to do it. God dang!
There it is, right there. That's my backyard. Those are my 3 hydroponic bins, and I'm getting a 4th one I'm going to be building. And so I have a little thing on my YouTube channel where I talk about growing your own food in your backyard. I grow kale.
My God.
Collards.
What I love is I was
He's
just kind of making a joke. I was making a joke.
I couldn't identify cal.
I just need bodies for my compost heap. That's all.
I'd be like, that's spinach. I don't know.
There we go. Steve Gosney, hydroponic garden.
I am not a weeder. I'm not one of those weed guys. It's simply
Kale's a weed.
Weeder.
We believe you. If you use that terminology, we believe you.
Right. I'm not a weeder either. So everyone keeps saying I'm a weeder. I'm not a weeder.
It's a weeder, Steve. I'm not a weeder, Gosney. Norm, what do you have coming up?
This week, picking a jury in a murder case. Very fascinating self-defense case. We expect to win it. But we did a focus group this week, worked one late into the evening with a group of ordinary people to identify themes. And picking juries in Connecticut's a lot of fun. It's what's called individual sequestered voir dire. You get a chance to question each juror outside the presence of the others. We'll be looking for 16 people. It'll take a week or 2 to pick. And, it's a good opportunity to see what's on the mind of ordinary people and ask them questions about how they get their news, how they form their perceptions of people, the criminal justice system, and frankly, reality itself. So I'm looking forward to it. And, it's here in New Haven too. So the benefit is, it's not like driving an hour, spending 8 hours in court, coming back an hour, working in the office or sleeping in a hotel. I'll be in my own bed in my own town, doing something that I've done more than anybody I know, picking jurors. I've spent thousands of days doing it, and I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. Joe, we like to always finish up with Joe. So he says whatever's going on. He has a Gifts and Go. I've told everybody there's a link in the description if you want to donate. I donated earlier. And what I was trying to say is feel free to donate anonymously. I totally get it. There are people who are going to be looking at that Gifts and Go, and they may call employers. They may do things like that. We're very aware of the actual threat, but you can donate anonymously, and I'm sure that it would help Joe a lot. But anyway, Joe always
I don't care about the topic. I just don't want anybody to know I'm giving money to Joe.
Well, there's that too. That's the truly embarrassing part. But
yes, and I'll tell you, I assume every anonymous gift to my Give Send Go is coming from Jeff up here. That every time. So all of you who are donating anonymously, I'm like, my God, Jeff just keeps donating and donating and donating. He's amazing. I want to thank you for having me on here, and I want to thank especially Norm, who went AFK, for pushing back and helping me hone my arguments. I'm still not sure whether or not I'm going to be having oral arguments on Monday. It may be happening. It may be on submission. I'm trying to verify that with the court. From what I hear from the clerk, who I, for one reason or another, feel a little concerned about trusting what the clerk tells me, because the clerks there seem to know me and dislike me. So if they tell me, oh no, you don't have to come in here, it's on submission, I'm like, really? But wait, is it really? So, but I am fighting. I have sued Judge Merchan. I am fighting to get Trump's gag off. The reason I'm fighting, I'm actually about to upload a video, which is a clip from it's a segment from my discussion last night with Nick Rekieta, where I'm basically explaining how this fight that I'm embroiled in is not my fight, and it's not even Donald Trump's fight. It's your fight for the First Amendment, and that we expect that I'm going to have to take this all the way up to the Supreme Court to find vindication here. And if that does happen, so that's why I'm not taking any potential loss that's coming in New York as being a necessarily a hit, because that just makes the victory in the long term, as I said from the get-go. If we lose in New York, if we lose the First Department, that means New York City lost. If we lose, but that means that, but if we win in the Court of Appeals, that means the state of New York wins. And if we lose there and we win in the Supreme Court, it means the country wins. So there may be some losses along the way, but the further down the road we get, the more global an impact this case has. And it's going to cost us money to get there. And that's why I urge you to visit givesendgo.com/ungag Trump. And whatever you can donate to this cause, we're fighting. I'm not fighting for me. I'm not fighting for Trump. I'm fighting for you and for every other American out there. So, and even if you don't have money, and many of you, I'm sure, unfortunately, in the Biden economy are struggling. If you don't have money, just even a nod of appreciation is genuinely recognized, and it's uplifting, and I appreciate it. That's where I'm going to push you all. Thank you.
Thank you all. And I'm not cutting him off, because I'm not going to sit there and gag Joe in the middle of his trying to ungag Trump, and everybody's going to bust my balls on it later. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you.